What's good, math family? In today's video, we're going to look at 15 problems that you guys will see on the EOC. I'm going to show you how to solve them and all the helpful tips and tricks to pass the EOC in your first time. As we look at problem number one, what they want us to do is basically add and subtract radicals. And before we do that, we know we have to break the radical down and they have to have the same number under the radical. So when we break this down, right, and we should know that all the x's they're going to stay under the radical because none of them are x squared or higher. So when we break this down, we have 4 times 3 times x. Simplify that to 2 times radical 3x. We go over to 27. We know we're subtracting. This turns into 9 times 3 times x. Take the square root out of 3. Just remember we're multiplying that 3 by this outside number. So minus 12 times radical 3x plus, and in math family, when you're working with these large radical square roots, let's just try to divide by 3. Let's see if 3 could help us simplify. So when I do 192 divided by 3, I notice something. So right here, we could change 192 into 64 times 3 times x. Perfect square comes out as 8. 8 times 5 is going to give us 40. And then we have radical 3x. Now, all we need to do is just add and subtract coefficients. So we have negative 10 radical 3x plus 40 radical 3x. And just like that, we know our final answer is just 30 radical 3x. So when we're looking at radicals, just remember radicals have to be the same for us to add and subtract. Problem number 2 now, they gave us a shape and they want us to figure out what the area is. But just remember, math family, area is length times width, right? So we know when we follow the properties of exponents, x times x gives us x squared. So we should know off rip A, B can't be the answer, right? Number 2, without doing any math, we should know the answer is D. Why? Because anytime you multiply two binomials, our product, the answer will always be a trinomial. So please make sure you remember that. The only way we get a binomial after multiplying two binomials is a difference of squares. But just to double check, let's use the box method. So I have 4x and 5, and I have 2x and 3. When I multiply, we have 8x squared, 10x, 12x, 15. Once we combine those like terms and write it in standard form, this would be our answer. So just please understand that concept because we didn't even have to multiply to get this question correct. Now, if it's perimeter, fill in the opposite sides and then add all your like terms. So if this was perimeter, we'd have 8x, would have 12x plus 5, 10, plus 16. So if they were asking for the perimeter, then our answer would be choice A. As we move to this next problem now, we're dealing with rearranging formulas, and you're definitely going to see this. So they ask us to solve the equation for C. Another way they'll frame it is, hey, they'll say something like, what would the equation be in terms of C? So just understand we're solving for C. So when we look at this here, the first thing we want to do is probably get rid of our fraction. So I multiply by 2 here, multiply by 2 on the opposite side. So now we have 2a is equal to b plus c multiplied by h. Now, anytime anything is in parentheses, you can't separate it until it's by itself. All right, until it's completely by itself, especially if you're trying to get a term that's inside. So before we could separate this, we need to take care of h by dividing. So now we divide, and now we have, oops, 2 times a divided by h is equal to b plus c. So if we're solving for c, right, understand that we're doing b plus c. B is positive, so we're going to subtract. So after I subtract b, right, and I go on the other side and subtract, we're going to have 2a divided by h minus b is equal to c. So this is how you will properly solve. And when we look at our answer choices, this is going to be answer choice C. So make sure you remember rearranging equations. It's rearranging formulas. It's the same concept for solving equations. Next problem, we're now dealing with a rational expression. And all we need to do is simplify this fraction. And to do that, what we want to do is simplify by factoring. So when I break this down, I'm going to have x, let's see, multiply to give us 30. All right. So x minus 10 times x plus 3, right? That's the top factor. Now when we go to the bottom, I'm going to use my slip and slide factor because we have a lead coefficient. So this turns into x squared plus 7x plus 6, just multiplied a times c. So now once I try to simplify this, we're going to have x, let's see, x plus, I want to say 6 times x plus 1, right? And after we do that, we're now going to divide those two factors by the same number we multiply. So we divide by 2. This simplifies to x plus 3. So that's our first factor. All right. Second one, if we can't divide and get a whole number, we just take that denominator, put it in front of the x. So the second factor is 2x plus 1. So now when I put this here, we can use the properties of fractions and simplify by canceling. So x plus 3 cancels out with x plus 3. I'm left with x minus 10 on top divided by 2x plus 1. So my final answer should be C. So if you see rational expressions, always try to simplify by factoring first and then see if you can simplify by canceling anything in the top or the bottom. We're looking at how to create and solve absolute value inequalities. And the way we set our equation up or inequality up is always based off what sign we have, inequality sign. So because we have a less than, we are going to create an and inequality where x is in the middle. If it was greater than or greater than equal to, we would create two separate inequalities and use or. So what we're going to do is just rewrite the same equation, right? Keep it the same. And then what we're going to do on the other side is just rewrite our answer and make it negative. And the whole goal is to get x by itself in the middle. So once I subtract 2, right, and I do this on both sides, this is what I'm going to have. So now at this step, we need to get x absolutely by itself. So we're going to divide by -5. And as we divide by -5, we have to remember the most important inequality rule. If we divide or multiply by -x, we got to flip the signs. So now positive 9 over 5, right? Switch this to greater than x, which is greater than -1. So what is this saying? This is saying that, hey, x is less than 9 over 5 and greater than -1. So when we look at this sign is not there. But the way we could solve this is, let's just look at our answers, right? So D, 9 over 5 is negative. That can't be the answer. C, both of them are positive. That can't be the answer. B, both of them are negative. That can't be the answer. So A has to be our answer. And if we rewrote it, right? So let's say we had X, right? And we're trying to say, hey, X is greater than -1 and less than 9 over 5. Let's look at if we wrote that same answer. Is this saying the same thing? And it is. X is greater than -1 and less than 9 over 5. So just understand how to solve and create the absolute value equation and what to do if we divide by a negative. Another problem we're going to see in the Algebra 1 EOC math family is equations that have fractions. And I'm going to show you two methods to solve this. So the first method, we could combine 1 over 6 and 5 over 6 by subtracting, right? So once we do that, we have x minus 2 all over 3 is equal to 4 over 6 after we combine this side. Now from this step, we can use properties of proportions, right? Set up that equation by cross multiplying. So 4 times 3 is equal to 6 times x minus 2. Now when I simplify, we have 12 is equal to 6x minus 12. Add 12 on both sides to combine like terms. We get 24 is equal to 6x. And after we divide by 6, We know x is equal to 4, which is a. But let's say in our second method that I'm going to show you, we did something different. So let's say we had the same problem, right? X minus 2 over 3. So we could use what we call the least common denominator. So all three of these denominators could each go into 6, right? And when we use this method, we basically get rid of the denominator. So 6 divided by 3 is 2. 2 times x gives me 2x. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. 6 divided by 6, right? That cancels out. We're just left with the numerator plus 1. Same thing here. 6 and 6 cancels. We're just left with 5. So now we just simplify and solve our equation. 2x minus 3 is equal to 5. Once we add 3 on both sides, we'll have 2x is equal to 8, and we get x is equal to 4. So just make sure you know how to solve these type of equations with more than one method, because you don't know which one will work better in which situation. In our next problem, we're still looking at inequalities, but I wanted to touch on this because students make a very common mistake, and that is they solve the problem too fast. So here's our problem, right? We have 7x plus 2 is greater than or equal to 58. Now, most of us are conditioned to just solve it and whatever we get is the answer. But that's not the case, and you have to make sure you read. It said, which number is not in the solution set? So let's just solve it, right? So now we have 7x is greater than or equal to 56. Once we simplify by 7, x is greater than or equal to, oops, I put 56, 7. X is greater than or equal to 8. So off rip, we're going to think, okay, our answer is 8. But that is not the answer. The reason why is it said which number is not in the solution set. So basically, which one would not satisfy this answer, and it would be A. Why? It tells us our answer has to be either 8 or any number greater. So numbers that are less than 8 will not be in the solution set. On the EOC, we're definitely going to see a whole bunch of problems on the topic of quadratic equations. So right here, they want us to solve for x. And for us to solve, we're going to have to use the square root method, meaning whatever binomial we have here or x squared term, we have to get it by itself. So first thing we want to do is just divide by 3. So now we have x minus 4 squared is equal to 27 divided by 3, which is 9. Now we're doing the square root method. To get rid of exponents, we take the root of it, right? The square root. What we do on one side, we do to the other. So now we have x minus 4, square root of exponent cancels itself out, is equal to plus or minus the square root of 9, right? And we know this is a perfect square, right? So let's just change this to 3, right? Now we simplify by getting x by itself. X is equal to what? Add 4 on both sides. 4 plus or minus 3. So now this is where we split our equations to get two different answers. So we know x is equal to 4 plus 3. X is equal to 7. And our second one, x is equal to 4 minus 3, which means x is equal to 1. So our answer choice should be A. So when we talk about the square root method, guys, please make sure that you double check this topic. We've had videos on it recently. We'll link it down below for you guys. Next problem we're looking at is going to be a problem where we have to complete the square. And what it's asking us is which equation has the same solution as this one right here. And understand, math family, we're not solving it entirely. We're going to set it up by completing the square. So the first thing we want to do is to move 12 over to the other side because we want to create a perfect square trinomial. So after the first step, we have x minus 6x is equal to positive 12. Now to create the perfect square trinomial, we always take half of the b term, which is 3. 3 squared is 9. So once we write the perfect square trinomial, it'll be x squared minus 6x plus 9 is equal to 12 plus 9. We got to make sure we balance the equation by adding it on both sides. Now, after we do this, we're going to simplify this trinomial to the actual binomial that we squared to get this. If you forget, just do b divided by 2. It was 3. So now we know x minus 3 squared is equal to 12 plus 9, which is going to be 21. So essentially, this is what they wanted us to do. They just want to know which one of these answers is going to be the same as the actual problem we're working out. And when we look, it'll be answer choice B. So just make sure you guys understand how to complete the square, because you're definitely going to see more than one, maybe even more than two problems on that topic. In our next problem, they give us a expression that has a radical in the bottom of the fraction, and we know we can't have those. So what we need to do is rationalize the denominator. So we could multiply by the same denominator, or we could split it. Or when I mean split it is to simplify it. So we have 9 times 2 times x times y squared. Once we simplify, this comes out as 3. 2 and x stay the same. Y squared comes out as y. And what's under the radical is just 2x. So now we simplify the denominator. Let's go ahead now and let's rationalize. So remember that when you rationalize, you only multiply by what's under the radical. So we're going to multiply by radical 2x. We're going to go in the top and multiply by radical 2x. And now once we simplify, what we should have is 3 times radical 2x all over 3y times 2x. So when we take this one step further and we simplify, we're going to have 3 times radical 2x all over 6xy. And now once we divide by simplifying 3 and 6, we're going to get radical 2x all over 2xy as a final answer. And when we look at our answer choices, that's going to give us answer choice A. So just understand how to rationalize the denominator when we have just one term versus two. And I've linked a video on the conjugates, right? That's when we rationalize with more than one term in the denominator, down below as well. In our next problem, we're still dealing with completing the square, because they gave us a function and they want us to take it from standard form to vertex form, right? And I'm going to show you guys how to do that. So let's rewrite our problem, right? 3x squared plus 12x plus 11. So understand, anytime we use this method, we want to get our leading term to just 1, x squared. So off rip, we could probably just delete a, right? Now, the second thing I want to do is let's start creating that perfect square trinomial, right? So let's split these. So I'm going to factor out a GCF, right? So f of x is equal to 3. Then we have x squared plus 4x plus 11. 11, we're treating it separate, all right? So now when we try to complete the square, half of 4 is 2, 2 squared is 4. So once we rewrite this again, right, our perfect square trinomial will be x squared plus 4x plus 4, right? Now, once we bring down this plus 11, we have to factor in this 4 that we add on the outside, right? Because we're writing it in vertex form. And one thing we have to be mindful of is this 3. So yes, we added 4 here, but once we multiply it by 3, it's actually 12. So when I add, when I add 12, right, balance the equation. So if I add it, that means I subtract. I'm going to get f of x is equal to 3 times x plus 2 squared. And then when we combine positive 11 and negative 12, we get minus 1. And this would be our answer. Now, I know some of you guys are looking like, man, that's a little weird how you did it, Professor Peters. I got you. So let's just go back and let's simplify so you can see what I mean. So let's say we went back to this step, right? And let's say instead of keeping like how I did, I subtracted 11. So now we're at negative 11, and we did the same thing. So now I create my perfect square trinomial, right? Now I add 12 on this side. So what do I get? 12 minus 11, this is 1. 1 is equal to what? 3. And then we break this trinomial back down to its binomial. X plus 2 squared. So now when I subtract 1 on both sides, I'm still going to get the same exact answer. All right. So just make sure you understand that concept, math family. We're dealing with Pythagorean theorem. Yes, we're going to see it. So we already know the formula a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. So once we set this up, let's switch colors. We're going to have 20 squared plus 40 squared is equal to c squared. All right. And once we simplify one step further, we're going to get 400 plus 1600 is equal to c squared. Oh, I'm not 440 times 40. I'm sorry, family. All right, so we get 2000 is equal to c squared. So what I really wanted to tell you guys is don't bust your brain trying to figure out what numbers to break this radical down with, right? And this is what I mean. So let's say we go to this step. We're trying to take the square root and we get c is equal to what? Math family, look, they got the answer for us. So let's try 3. All right, let's try 3. So we have 2000 divided by 3. I get a decimal. So I already know it probably won't be this answer or this answer. But if I go back and do 2000 divided by 5, I get 400 times 5. So here's my perfect square, which is what? 20. So now once I simplify this, c is equal to the square root of 400, which is 20, and radical 5 stays under the radical because we can't break it down anymore. So now our answer is going to be B. And like I said, if you're working with these multiple choice problems, look at what's under the radical. You could use that to help you find out how and what to break down the radical with. So slope is going to be another topic that we're definitely going to see on the Algebra 1 EOC. And they're telling us that, hey, they're asking us for the equation of a line that passes through these 2 points, right? So there's 2 formulas we need to know. One, slope formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And then the point slope formula, which is y minus y1, which is equal to x, oops, not x, I'm sorry, which is equal to m times x minus x1. But before we get into that, math family, you really got to understand these things and use process of elimination, right? So we know this is x and y, and obviously that was the point they selected for the point slope formula. But if you pay attention, we could eliminate 2 answers, right? It says y minus y, 1. So we should have y minus 7, right? So off rip, this is y minus x. That's wrong. Same thing here. This is y minus x. So off rip, we now have a 50-50 chance. Now, let's see if we could figure out what exactly is the slope. So now I have m is equal to 7 minus 3, right? 7 minus 3 divided by 2 minus negative 1. So when I simplify, I'm going to get 4 over positive 3. So now when I look at my answer, right, I'm looking for a 4 over 3 slope and for the correct substitution. So that should be our answer, which is answer choice D. However, right, let's say if we went in and we actually tried to solve. So we have y minus 7 is equal to what? Our slope, 4 over 3 times x minus our x, right? So we go through y minus 7 is equal to 4 over 3x minus 8 over 3. Now I add 7 on both sides. Add 7 on both sides. But if we want to write it as a fraction, let's change it to 21 over 3. That's the same as 7. So now y is equal to positive 4 over 3 x. And when we do, I think this should be 13, right? 21 minus 8 or negative 8 plus 21. So this should be plus 13 over 3. So if they asked you to actually write the equation out, this is how you would do it, even with a fraction and combining, unlike denominators. In our next problem, math family, what they're asking us is basically the domain of a quadratic function without the graph. So let's understand a few things, right? They give us this function, tells us that it represents height in feet of an object above ground at t seconds after it's dropped. So let's rewrite this, right? So we have h of t is equal to negative 16t squared plus 144. Now we know based off the problem, h of t is going to be height in feet, and we know t is going to be time in seconds, right? So when we look at this, let's say we made our own graph. We know the independent variable is x, right? Time in seconds, and we know that affects the height in feet, right? So when we think about all real numbers to represent the domain, that's not true, right? It's not going to be all real numbers. When we look at answer choice A and we're talking about domain time, time cannot be negative, so this doesn't make sense. Now, when we get to answer choice B and C, now we're looking at the variables they're referring to. Right here, they're referring to height. That's why that is the range. We're asked about domain. So we know the answer choice has to be B, meaning what? At 0 seconds, we're at the highest height. We throw that ball off the cliff, and at about 3 seconds, it should hit the ground. That is a realistic domain compared to our other answer choices. So let's be on the lookout for this type of problem. Last problem of our EOC review, and we really hope you've enjoyed it, math family. If you have, smash the like button and comment down below for us. So we're dealing with shading inequalities and matching the correct graph. So the equation we need to make sure we remember is y is equal to mx plus b. So once we pay attention to this graph, we notice that our y-intercept is at 0, 4. So off rip, we could eliminate our last two answer choices because they had the wrong y-intercept. Now we focus on choices A and B. And for us to determine which one is correct, we're going to use a test point. So I'm going to use the test point 40 to see if we get a true statement or not. So when I plug this into my first inequality, we have, let's see, 0 is greater than or equal to -3 times 4 plus 4. So once we simplify this now, we get 0 is greater than -12 plus 4. So now we know 0 is greater than -8. Because this is a true statement, that means we would shade in this area. So the inequality for this graph would be B. Now, if we shade it on the bottom side, then our answer choice would be B. So let's understand the difference between how to shade and how to pick a point to determine which side is the actual correct side. Really hope this EOC review for you guys was helpful. Smash the like button for us, subscribe to the channel, and leave comments down below if you found this video helpful, or if you have any questions or concerns about problems on this video. Thank you guys so much for joining us today on Algebra 1 with Mr. Peters.